Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf, Nedarim Daf Membeis. We are holding right on top of the Amud at the Mishnah. Hamud hano mechaveru. You have Reuven, who is a field owner growing produce, who tells Shimon, his friend, look, I'm making a neder against you. You can't have any anah from me. So if this neder was activated lifnei shvius, before the Shemitah year, it takes effect. It takes full effect. Eina yored l'seich sadeu. Going forward, Shimon may not even enter Reuven's field. That's called drisas haregel. Even just walking through his property is asur, as we learned back on Daf Lamed Beis. Number two, ve'eino eichel min hanoites. Even if he doesn't actually access Reuven's field, he'll just pick some fruit which lean over, outside the field, over the boundary. Even those hanging fruit are asur to Shimon, and according to one pshat in the Gemara, even if it is now already Shemitah, it would still be asur because the neder was applied before Shemitah, when the produce still belonged to Reuven and was not yet hefker. So that's if the neder was expressed before Shemitah. But halacha number two, ubishvi'is, if the neder was activated on Shemitah itself, that's according to one pshat in the Gemara, that changes the equation. Eina yored l'seich sadeu. Even now, Shimon may not actually enter Reuven's property, and you'll ask why. I mean, the Torah considers all of Reuven's fruit hefker, and of course, included in that is the ability to access those fruit. And the Gemara will deal with this. Why is there an isser to walk through his property even on Shemitah, but it's limited to drisas haregel? The fruit themselves, they are mutar to Shimon, and therefore, if you can have access to them without entering Reuven's property, it would be mutar. Aval eichel hu minan etias hanoites, but Shimon certainly can pick any fruit that lean over outside his field. So in the first section of the Mishnah, we discussed a mudar hana. Case one was where the neder was activated before Shemitah. Case two, where it was activated on Shemitah. Here comes section two. Nadar heimenu machal. Suppose the neder was, don't partake in my food. It did not include hana other than food. It was simply limited to food. The halacha is lefnei shvius, before shvius, yored l'seich sadeu. He can enter the field of Reuven. There's no isser on that. Ve'eino eichel min haperes, but he cannot partake in the peres themselves. That's machal. Ubeshvius, but on Shemitah itself, where the fruit is hefker, yored v'eichel, Shimon may enter and actually consume the produce as well. Now, we have two ways to understand the Mishnah. First, we have Rabu Shmuel. Damar Tavayu, they both explain like this. The fellow says as follows: Nechasai ol elu olecha. These belongings of mine, nechasai elu olecha, should be asur on you by way of neder. What happens? So it depends when he activated this neder. When did he say it? Lifnei shvius. If this neder was uttered before Shemitah, when the nechasim, when the peres were still belonging to Reuven, the neder gets applied and stays on. This neder obligates Shimon. It forbids him to actually enter Reuven's property and have his fruit. Listen to this chiddush. Since the neder was expressed before Shvius, the isser, which was chal on Reuven's property, stays on, is maintained even into Shvius, when the property is no longer belonging to Reuven. Because once you apply an isser, it no longer moves away from the item. It stays there, even beyond the point of Reuven's ownership, even into Shemitah. So that's the first part of the Mishnah. If the neder was said before Shemitah, the isser is applied and is maintained throughout Shemitah as well. That's Rav and Shmuel's chiddush. V'mishvius nadar. Here's a second case of the Mishnah. If the neder was actually said on Shemitah, in which case Reuven has no right to forbid anybody from partaking in his fruit and accessing the fruit via his field. In this case, we still don't allow Shimon to walk through his field. Why? The Gemara will explain to us later. There's a gzera, there's a concern that he might overstay, etc. But the fruit is hefker. And if he can find a way to access his fruit without accessing this field, that's okay. He can take from those hanging fruit. So bottom line is, according to Rabbi Shmuel, once you make a neder, even if it was expressed in this manner, nechasai elu alecha, my nechasim are yours, which perhaps would indicate that the isser on the nechasim are dependent on ownership, are dependent upon my owning these things. Still and all, you say the isser, once it's there, no longer leaves. So if the neder was done before Shemitah, even come Shemitah, the neder remains. But if it was done on Shemitah, you have no right to limit access on Shemitah. The neder has no value. So that's Rav Shmuel. However, for Rabbi Yehuda, Reish Lakish, the Amar Tavai, they both disagree. Nechasei alecha lifnei shvius, ein yored l'sech sedeu, ve'ein oichel min hanotis. So it's a year before Shemitah. He says Nechasei alecha. Until Shemitah, it's all Asr, because it's his, and he has a right to hold his friend back from accessing his property and his fruit. But Higia Shvius, once Shemitah arrives, it's over. The Isser dissipates, it disappears. Eino Yard L'Sech Sadeo. So access to field he still has no allowance to, because we had the Gzera, which we mentioned before, and the Gemara later will elaborate on that. So don't enter the field, but the actual fruit is mutar, the fruit are mutar. So it would seem that according to Rabbi Shmuel, once an Isser is applied, even if he alluded to ownership, my things, once the Isser is there, it's as though he gave it away to Hegdish pertaining to his friend. It's it. It's a permanent situation. It just carries into Shemitah as well. You can't just remove it without, doing something to remove it. It just stays there on its own. So that's case one of the Mishnah. That's a big chiddush. Case two is he attempted to make the neder on Shemitah. That doesn't work. That's Rav and Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda, Rish Lakish disagree. The Isser was ownership dependent. When it's mine, it's Asr on you. That works until Shemitah. Once Shemitah comes, it's over. So according to them, the Mishnah in effect is saying like this. He made a neder before Shemitah. It works until Shemitah. Once Shemitah comes, it's over. Perhaps the machlekes between these two approaches revolves around the following question. The Rav Shmuel Savri, because Rav and Shmuel hold, Adam Eiser Davash B'Reshusah, a person has the ability to apply an Isser to something which is in his possession forever. Afilu L'Kashayet B'Reshusah, even to the point that it would stay and linger and be maintained even after he loses possession and ownership. That's their shita. Rabbi Yehuda, Reish Lakish Savri, as opposed to they who hold differently. Ein adam eiser davash b'reshusay. Person can't apply an isser to something which is in his reshus, that it should stay that way forever, even once he gives up ownership. Look at sheyetzim reshusay. That would seem to be the machlekes here, but it can't be. V'tisbro, can you even suggest such an approach? Is there any shita, any opinion that would hold that a person doesn't have the ability to apply an Isser now and have the Isser remain on even past his ownership? Meaning, are you suggesting that Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yehuda hold this opinion, hold this view? Because if indeed that's their point, Im Kain, why, when they're presenting their opinion, what do they say? They say, a person says, Nichsay Alecha, my belongings are also to you. Well, it's only as long as he owns them. In this case, only until Shemitah, not including. If there is a fundamental machlekes here between these two approaches, Rav and Shmuel hold that once an Isser is applied, it no longer leaves, and they disagree. They hold that it is ownership dependent. It is possession dependent. Well, it's mine, it's Asr, but no longer once I give up ownership. If that's the case, if that is true, they should have cited the halacha in the most grand way possible. They should have cited a greater chiddush. Im kain, if that's their point, nifligi b'nechasim elu, they should have presented their shita differently. If one says, these nechasim are asr, guess what? It's only as long as I own them, but not afterwards. They should have said it that way. And certainly if he says, if he actually hinges it on his ownership, my nechasim, nechasai, of course it's owner dependent. Why didn't they say it this way? When he says nechasai, it only lasts as long as he owns them. If they are of the opinion that one doesn't have the ability to make something asr past his ownership, they should have said it in a greater way, in a greater chiddush. That even when he says nechasim elu, these possessions, alluding to the item, to the property, to the house, to the field, without alluding to his ownership, you should know that even then it only lasts as long as he owns it, but not past. So why didn't they say it this way? Why did they present it and package it in a manner which limits the chiddush? If he says nechasai, you should know it's only as long as he owns them. That's a lesser chiddush. That's one kasha. Visu, another kasha. We know for a fact that a person has the ability to make something asr beyond his ownership. Hatana, we have a mishnah. A person does have the ability to apply an issa which will be retained beyond the point of his ownership. A fellow turns to his son. You can't have an anna for me. What happens if he dies? Meis, Yiroshenu. The son inherits. But if he specifies, the Isser should last even beyond my death, in this case, in Meis la Yiroshenu, even when he dies, and he loses possession, the son can't have anna. Clearly, you have the ability to apply an Isser for all time, even beyond ownership. This fellow's Meis, he has no ownership, but once the Isser is applied, it's gone. It's over. I'm sorry. Once it's there, it no longer leaves. That's a kasha on this approach that we're suggesting that according to Rabbi Yehuda Kessler, you can't do that. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Let's address the second kasha first. There's no right from that case of the father and son. Here he specified. He said it's as long as I live and after my death, so it's different. But who's to say that if he didn't specify, it would work? That kasha is not a kasha, but the first question regarding the way they package their shita, mikom kasha, that would be a kasha. So according to this attempt, according to this havamina, we're thinking like this. According to Rav and Shmuel, once you apply an isser on your nechasim, the isser no longer dissipates, no longer expires, even after he loses ownership and possession. Whereas according to Rabbi Yehuda Kessler, it's not so. It's owner dependent. The question was, then they should have expressed the chiddush in a greater way. Even when you say these things are asr, without hinging it on your ownership. Even if you say this is asr, you should know it only lasts as long as you own them. Why? Why didn't they say it this way? Says the Gemara, you're right. Here comes the next attempt. Elo b'nechasim elu kule amale pligi. You're right. Should the person say these properties, these possessions, these belongings are asr on you? Kuli amale pligi, all agree that the isr outlasts the owner. It just stays there forever. There's no machlekes in that case. Ki pligi, when then do we have machlekes? Benechasai. When he says nechasai elu, referring to ownership while they're mine. Here comes the question. What did he have in mind? Did he dependent on his ownership, and therefore once he loses possession, it's over? Or shall we say, nechasai just means, these things that belong to me, or nechasai elu, these things that belong to me. It's not dependent upon my ownership. It's just a way of reference. These things that I own. But of course, the Isser outlasts the owner and is maintained even after he gives up the ownership. That's the Machlekes. Rav Shmuel Sabri. Rav Shmuel hold Lo Yishna Nechasim Elu. Whether he ignored any reference to his ownership, he just said these things are also to you. Lo Yishna, or he said Nechasai, my things. Either way, Adam Oiser, the Isser remains intact even after he gives up these Nechasim. And Rabbi Yehuda and Rish Lakish Sabri, they disagree. They say when it's Nechasim or Nechasim Elu, meaning direct reference to the assets without alluding to the owner, then the Isser remains forever. Adam Oiser. But Nechasai, my things are also to you. That's owner dependent, that's personal. Ein Adam Oiser, the Isser only lasts as long as he owns them. So let's stop for a second. The Ran explains that according to this pshat, this is attempt number 2, the Mishnah will be explained as follows. So we have the case of the Mudar Hana. If the neder was made before Shemitah, so it's Asr. On Shemitah, it's Mutter. Okay? So according to Rav and Shmuel, was speaking even when he said Nechasai, my things. So if the Isser was applied before Shemitah, right? So it is Asr, and it even stays Asr into Shemitah when it no longer belongs to him, when it's Hefker, because once the Isser is applied, it stays there for all time. In case number 2, Ubeshvius means he made the neder on Shemitah, he has no right to withhold the payrots which are Hefker from his friend, and therefore the Isser is not applied. So Rav Shmuel learned that the Mishnah is speaking about Nechasai. Even Nechasai, so it's a personal thing, but if the neder was done before Shemitah, the Isser remains. According to Rabbi Yehuda Kessler, it's the same halacha, but instead of Nechasai, they changed it to Nechasim. So he didn't make a personal reference, because in that case, even if you were to make the neder before Shemitah, but once he loses ownership, i.e. Shemitah arrives, the Isser no longer applies. Rather, we're speaking that he said Nechasim Elu, a direct reference to the actual item and the actual possession, the actual field. In that case, when he made the neder before Shemitah, the Isser remains into Shemitah. Whereas if he made it on Shemitah, it's the second case, the Isser cannot be applied. So basically, it's the same configuration of halachis, whether you're Rav Shmuel or whether you're going Rabbi Yehuda and Rish Lakish. The only difference is semantics. According to Rav Shmuel, the halacha applies whether he said Nechasim or Nechasai. But according to the other shittas, Dafka when he said Nechasim. That allows the Issa to remain, to be identified and relate to the actual item rather than the owner. So when the neder was done before Shemitah, it remains throughout Shemitah as well. Asks the Gemara, how can you say this pshat? It's not going to work either. Or how could anybody hold? Meaning, how could Rav Shmuel hold? Lo yishna nechasim elu, lo yishna nechasai, that whether he alluded directly to the properties without mentioning the owner, or he said nechasai, alluding to the owner, the effect will be the same. Meaning, the Isser would remain for all time. But now we have a Mishnah which clearly differentiates between this and that. You can't suggest otherwise. You can't lump them together. They're two different systems. So Reuben turns to Shimon and he says, by way of neder, I'm not entering your home. So the entry to your home, personal, is asur to me. Or sadecha, shani lakeach, purchase of your field to me is asur. So here he made direct reference to the owner. As long as it's yours, I can't take it. What happens if mace? The owner died or sold it to somebody else? Mutter. The Isser is no longer, because it was personal, your thing. But if he generalizes, my entry to this home is asur. My purchase of this field is asur. Nothing to do with the owner. It was item-based, it was object-based. Mace, in this case, even if he dies or he passes it on to somebody else, asur, it remains asur. Because it's property-based. Not personal. It's property-based. So how can you suggest there would be no difference between the chosim, which is property-based, and the chosai, which is personal-based? Elo, says the Gemara, this is the final and third attempt. Elo ki amri Rabbeinu Resh Lakish ben chosai, v'Rav Shmuel ben chosim. Elo v'lei pligu. You know, sometimes it appears like there's a great machlekes, but there really isn't. This is another example. There was no machlekes to begin with. It's like the Gemara says, mar marchada v'lei pligi. They're two separate shitas, but they're really one and the same, just pointing out different aspects of the same halacha. All agree that yes, certainly there's a difference. If the neder was expressed in an item-based manner, nuchosim elu, then it outlasts its owner. So in the case of the Sada with Shemitah, if he said it before Shemitah and he alluded directly to the property, not to the owner owning the property, then the Isser remains into Shemitah. It remains and it's maintained intact. Even after the owner loses possession. This field is Asr to you. But if he says it on Shemitah, of course it can't work. So that's the case in the Mishnah. And in fact, when Rav Shmuel told us that it is so, that the Isser outlasts its owner, we're speaking about this very case. Either he said Nechasim or he said Nechasai Elu. Again, Elu is a reference to the actual item. And all agree. Rabbi Yehuda Kessler also agree that if he says it in this manner, the Isser is maintained for all time. So all they're pointing out is that you have to be careful. Because typically you don't do that. You say my things, right? Nether is two people got into a fight and they made a nether to keep away from each other, personally from each other. Usually the typical expression is my things are us to you. That's all they're trying to say. Rabbi Yehuda Kessler are trying to point that out. That if you are to say nechasai, they don't apply the same idea. Then it's person-based. It's owner-based. And if it's yoytim mirshusai, the Isser is no longer intact. That's all. They're just trying to explain and elaborate on this idea. But never were they trying to disagree or dispute Rav Shmuel. So the bottom line is, according to the third and final approach, when a fellow makes an Isser on his possessions, on his field, relative to his friend, what did he mean? Well, it depends what he said. If he made it about himself as a person, as an owner, my things, then it expires as soon as he gets rid of the item. But if you made it about the actual item itself, then it's there for all time. Getting back to the Mishnah. In the first section of the Mishnah, we have a Mudar Hano. So if the nether was done lifnei Shvius, and it was item-based, then even going into Shvius, it's Asr. But if you made it on Shvius itself, he has no right to do that, and of course it doesn't work. But says the Gemara, but still he can't go into the fellow's field. Why? Why do you allow him to eat those hanging fruit? The pair defkerin, because Hashem made it hefker. Aranami afkra. Well, obviously to access fruit you have to go through the land. So that's included in the heter of Shemitah. You can't take away the guy's land, but you can access his fruit through his land. Amar Ula, you're right. Technically, you can use this field as well. But here we're speaking ba'imdin ilones alakvulim. The trees which you're trying to access are actually standing right at the boundary on the border. They can be accessed from the outside. So you have no heter, you have no reason to walk through his field, and that would be asr. That's one pshat. Rabbi Shimon and Yokim Amar, it's a derabban, it's a concern. If you allow him into the field, he might just linger, standing a little extra time, more than necessary, for picking of the fruit, in which case that would be an Isser for Mudar Hano. Therefore the Chacham say, keep out of the field. Okay, so that's today's daf. We should all be zeichet a lot of siyata d'shmaya and hatzlacha rabba always.